Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third in the series of Dialogues Around Death and the Three Principles. My name's Gillian Fox from Moving Beyond Bereavement. I'm a certified clarity coach and a certified Three Principles trainer and facilitator. And today I've got with me Sue Lachman from Israel. Sue is a very experienced Three Principles teacher. She trained 3 years ago with the and I've lost my script for a moment, One Thought Institute, and she's been bringing the Three Principles understanding into Israel ever since, and I know she's recently started a professional training course for Three Principles people to learn first their personal life and also within the business for people that want to take this understanding out into the world. And we were talking before we came on air about the relevance of this given the current situation in Israel, and I know Sue had to go to a shelter last night because they had a siren go off, and suddenly these conversations took on a very much wider context. You know, I sit in the safety of Oxfordshire in my cosy little life, and suddenly I get a message from Sue saying we've had to go to the shelter, we're under attack. And I think talking about this understanding and sharing this understanding, for me certainly, and I think for Sue as well, is a hope for humanity. More people that just wake up to the misunderstanding that we live in and realise that, you know, we create our experience through thought in the moment. That way lies peace. So it's a delight to welcome Sue to our hangout today, and I'd love to start, Sue, by asking you how you first found the principles and where it all went from there.
Well, thank you, Gillian. Quite an introduction. I don't know about experience, but teacher, but it's true, I've been sharing my understanding for a little while now of the Three Principles or innate health. I'm absolutely delighted to be here and talk to you again. I just love hanging out with you. It's great. So thank you. So yeah, my very interesting. I have 2 children with special needs with Down syndrome, and I live in Israel. I didn't always live here. I lived in the UK. And when I was living in the UK, I had to fight for everything I needed for my children in England, for their rights and in schooling and everything. And people caught on to that, so I started to work for a lot of people, helping them to get what they needed also from the local authorities, from the government in England, so that their children could have more, what they needed, basically, the resources that they needed. And with that came an interesting time for me, because a lot of people would tell me their problems, and you became a confidant, a friend to all the people I was helping, and you would hear about all the dynamics in the household that were going on, not just with their special needs children, but with their other children, with their husbands, wives, and their greater family, the bigger family. So I got into all of that, and I didn't realize actually that I was sort of becoming quite aggressive, quite loud, and very, I just wasn't nice. And I thought that that's how I had to be able to get what other people needed. And I thought that people expected me to be like that as well. And the truth of the matter is that I was very stressed out, very overwhelmed, not feeling very comfortable, but I actually dreaded sometimes having to make some of the phone calls. I represented people at tribunal, which is an informal court for those that don't know. And I'm not a lawyer or solicitor, but I'm self-taught, which is allowed in that sort of situation. And I would make up a story how it was going to go. I'd make up the whole story of what everyone was going to say before I went in and what everyone should say when I came out, and of course it never happened like that. But I mean, the main thing is that I got very stressed and overwhelmed by life generally, and I didn't think I was. That was the funny thing, until someone suggested that maybe I go and speak to a rabbi's wife, a Rebbitzin Fegi Twersky, and she spoke to me about the three principles. She told me that it's my thoughts that, and I was fuming with her because I couldn't understand that, how someone on such a high level as a rabbi's wife would even begin to understand what life was really about, let alone having children with special needs and all the things that the trimmings that go with it. So I was very angry with her. But there, and I marched off. We were staying at the time by the sea, by the ocean. I'm getting good at translating English to American, by the way. So that's my translation. And I was fuming with her, and I marched actually into town, and I didn't see anything. I didn't see the water. I didn't see the sky. I didn't see anybody. Even though people might have been smiling at me, I didn't see that. The weather was glorious, but I didn't see that. It looked very dark and dull to me. And it wasn't until I started walking back, and I started walking at a slower pace, that something sort of made me look around and feel suddenly very much at peace. So something she said sort of resonated with me, but I had no idea what, and I always believed that it was fine for everyone else, but not for me. And I thought, wow, maybe this is good for all the people that I'm helping. That's what I need to do. I need to find out more. So then when I speak to someone, I can tell them that they need to go and hear about this. So I started going to see someone called Terry Rubenstein, who is a great friend and mentor of mine still to this day, and I love her very dearly, and wish her better because she's still not feeling too great. She has Bell's palsy, and I heard more and more about this, but I was very determined that this was not for me. However, sometime afterwards, I had been listening to someone called Wayne Dyer. And we all know that, you put in a CD, and whatever is said on the CD, it's not changing. It's the same words day in, day out. And I was listening to the same CD, and one day, suddenly, I seemed to have heard, "Let go." Now, I must have heard that at least 100 times, but I hadn't heard it. It hadn't resonated. It hadn't touched me inside. It made logical sense up here, but it hadn't touched me deep inside. But for some reason that day it did. And I came down, and I had to deal with the children because they were up and they were we needed to get them dressed. And I just realized that I was different. And I kept looking over my shoulder, and I kept thinking, she's going to come back soon. Where is she? She's going to shout at them in a minute. But she didn't. And that's not to say that she doesn't now, because I do sometimes, but very rarely, very rarely. So that was my start, and with that I just knew I wanted to share this with everybody, and that this was for me and for everyone. So I immediately emailed Aaron Turner, who's co-director of the One Thought Institute, and said, I want to come on the course. And after quite an interview, which was interesting, I got on the course and did a 10-month course with One Thought Institute. And in between that, I started to share my understanding here in Israel. And it's grown and grown and grown. It's been incredible. I mean, no, actually it is we, because it's not just me. There is a force and an intelligence that certainly guided me and helped me in doing that. But there were 72 people at the conference, and I don't know where they came from. And there was a waiting list. So to me, that's just phenomenal. And as you said, I'm now training trainers, people to become trainers. So I have 8 people on my course, which is first year of doing this in Israel. And I'm doing teleclasses now on parenting. I'm doing workshops. I see people for intensives and one-to-ones. So that's what's happening. That's what happened, and it's still happening. It's still growing, and still I'm learning all the time, and that's what I love. I have 8 students. We just yesterday finished the 3rd day of a 3-day seminar, the second one on the course, and I learned so much from them. That's what I love about all of this. It's never ending.
Thank you, Sue. That's a lovely introduction to what you're doing and how it all started. And I love what you said about you hear. It's like you read a book and the words don't change on the page, but suddenly something will jump out at you and you think, well, that wasn't in there last time I read it. And what you said about the CD, well, he didn't say that before, but it's just that suddenly it's present in our mind. It kind of jumps out and hits us.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is, and we sort of have new thinking about it. Oh, gosh.
Isn't
And
that
then off
fun?
we go on a different, we start exploring a bit further and finding out a bit more, and
Yeah.
that's what you did. And it's great that you're now doing the professional courses that you're doing and opening up to more and more people. Fabulous.
Yeah. It's really fun, and I think that there was a lovely atmosphere in the room the last 3 days, and I think that I hope that will spill out into the world, and so certainly here anyway in Israel at least, and further afield. Obviously, with people like you, Gillian, doing this sort of thing, it just gets everywhere. It's just amazing,
Yeah.
technology nowadays.
Yes, and touch wood at the moment, technology is working on our side.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We had a specific topic that we're going to be in conversation about. So, and I know this is something that happened to you 22 years ago, and it's a discussion about losing a baby before it's born. Would you like to start sharing what happened and
Yeah,
talking about the subject?
yeah. I had one child. He was a year and in fact, he was a bit younger, maybe a year. And I fell pregnant very quickly again, much to my great delight at the time. And I remembered that the first time round that, because it was my first child, they were very, I went to the doctor and I told them that I was pregnant. And then I was told, well, you're going to get an appointment from the hospital. And I went up to the hospital and I sort of got into a system that I didn't really understand, but I went along with everything and had all the blood tests and did this and that and whatever I had to do and the scans and everything. And I just, when I was at one appointment, I would get another appointment. But initially it was all started from, can't remember exactly, but either a letter or someone phoning me and telling me I had to go to the hospital. And it was very interesting because I got to the stage where I was about 23 and a half weeks pregnant. And a few times it had sort of crossed my mind. It was funny, I haven't heard anything from anyone. But I'd been to the doctor and told him that I was pregnant early on, when I was about 12 weeks. And I just, it sort of went in my head and it went out, and it was almost like this, and it was like, well, don't be silly. This is your second birth, so the first one they're very vigilant and you need to be there for all the appointments, but this is the second one, so you don't really need to have so much. That's probably why nothing's happening, and they'll call you soon, and you'll have have a scan and everything will be okay, and then you'll give birth and that will be it, you know. And I'm an older mummy, so I was in my 30s, so I wasn't a child, but I was very naive, obviously. I just didn't know. I mean, and no one told me, so I didn't know what to expect. And then as I said, I was about 23 and a half weeks pregnant, and I got a frantic call from one of the nurses up at the local hospital at that time in England, where I was living. And she said, you know, Mrs. Lachman, you haven't been to any of your appointments. And I said, what appointments? I haven't even had any. What are you talking about? So she said, well, never mind that now. You need to come in immediately. You need to come in today. So, I mean, okay, you know, I waddled down there to the hospital, as you do, and didn't really think anything of it. I mean, she said, you know, we've been writing to you. And I said, well, I haven't received any letters. I haven't received anything. So she said, well, you've missed about half a dozen appointments, including blood tests and everything. So roll your sleeve up. We're going to give you a blood test now and a scan. So she took blood, had a scan, went home, didn't think anything else of it until the next day when I got a phone call. So I can't remember. You know what the truth is? I don't know if it was the next day, but it was fairly shortly afterwards. I got a call back saying, listen, something's... And I think I got a call back from the consultant, which was interesting. Something's not right. Something's not right in your bloods. You've got something, I can't remember what it was, you've got something in the bloods, it's not right. You need to come back and you need to have another test just to make sure. So I went back and had another test, and it came back and they said something's not right. So I thought, okay, well, I'll phone the consultant and I'll ask him, what does it mean? What is it? And, he said, well, he doesn't know. And but what he'd like to do is to send me up to one of the major hospitals. I can't remember if it was St. Thomas or Guy's. It was one of those. And I had to go up and I had to have an ultrasound. So I had to... I was quite pregnant, so I had to drink a lot of water before an ultrasound. And then I was going to have this fairly new chap who'd come from abroad, who was apparently an expert in this sort of thing, and he was going to have a look, and he was going to do an amniocentesis test. So he was going to poke a needle into me, which I had no idea about, and I said, oh, okay, fine. No one told me the risks, but anyway... I went up there with my husband and we had the test. The man was quite delightful. He's quite famous now. I met him when he wasn't so famous, and he came in and he was so amazing. He was so lovely. He was so kind, and he said, and he almost like talked to the baby, and he was going, look, I'm waving, and you could see the baby on the screen. And he said, look, you can see there's something like the baby's guts are hanging out. It's fine. He said, it's not a problem. That happens quite often. You can go and have birth at your normal hospital, but we'll take the baby straight away and we'll bring him up to here, to the, whichever one it was, St. Thomas's, I think, and we'll look after him. We'll operate immediately when he's ready to be operated on, and that's it. Go home, fine, it's not a problem. And that's what we believed. We thought that was it. And about, I do think that this was the next day now, the consultant phoned me and said, the baby has trisomy, I think it was 19. It was Edwards syndrome. I do know that. So I think it was, but he didn't tell me that. He didn't tell me it was Edwards syndrome. He just gave me a trisomy number. And I said, oh, fine. Well, what does that mean? And he said, I don't know. And I said, what do you mean you don't know? He said, I don't know, but we need to come in tomorrow. We need to discuss. Now, they don't use this word, and I can't remember what word they use. It isn't an abortion because it's too far, but it's something, it's a technical. What doesn't matter, but anyway. And I'm always very insistent that it wasn't an abortion, and in truth it was, I guess, but anyway. It made me feel better to call it something different. But we went in there, my husband and he said, this is it. It's trisomy 19, and I don't know what it means, but you have to come back tomorrow and go into the hospital, and we're going to induce you. and you're going to give birth, and that's the end of it, finished. And it was like, that's it. Well, there's no choice. That's it. That's what we have to do. We just have to do that. And it didn't sort of kick in yet, but that's what that was going to happen. And in the meantime, I went home and I phoned my mum, as you do, and I said to her, Mum, he said it's trisomy 19. What does that mean? And she said, look, I don't know. She said, but I'm going to ask my doctor. And she had a private doctor that she would use sometimes, and she asked him. And he came back and said, tell your daughter to go and do what the consultant said. So I thought, well, okay, that's what you do. You listen to what you're told. They know what they're doing. And bearing in mind, a long time ago, there was no counselling, there was no help, they didn't consider anyone's feelings, you just did it and finished. And they were very pressurised for time, because from what I remember or what I heard them say, 24 weeks is the cut-off. You can't do it any further than that. I believe that by then it was like so close, it was on the cusp of 24 weeks. So they were very panic-stricken. If anything had to happen, it happened straight away. So I was told the next morning to go in on Friday morning at 7. I think actually we were told to go in even earlier, 6:30 or something crazy. And we made sure that my other son was looked after by my sister. And I went to hospital, and no one was there to see me. No one. The nurses gave me the cold shoulder. I mean, as far as they were concerned, I'd come in to abort a child, which was to them disgusting. They didn't know any of the history. They just looked at me and treated me with contempt, really. And they were quite not nice to me, and to such an extent that actually much later my parents came in to sit with me, and my father said something to them and said, did you know why this is happening? And they said no. And he said, well, perhaps you ought to look up the records, but I'm going to tell you anyway. And when he told them, they were completely different to me. They were very nice to me after that, very understanding. Anyway, my in-laws came in as well. My husband is an only child, but his parents came in. And there ensued a lot of conversation during the day, because they gave me something, but eventually I didn't get seen till something like 11 o'clock in the morning, after being there really early. And the feeling inside me at the time was like trying to be on an even keel, and yet I was nervous. I was very nervous. I didn't know what this process was. This was not anything I'd gone through before. No one told me what was going to happen. They just said, we're going to do this and it's going to happen. And I naively thought that I would be in and out within a few hours and be home, and that would be it. I'd get over it and that would be it. And I'd start my life again, sort of thing. Or continue with my life. Not even start it. I didn't think it was ever going to stop. I didn't think that anything was going to impact me and nothing was going to happen that would be different, that would take me out of the norm. So it was a bit shocking to me that I was still hanging around at sort of 11 o'clock midday, and I still hadn't given birth. And then I started to ask, well, what's going to happen? How's this work? What's going to happen here? And they said, well, you have to give birth naturally. I said, you are serious? Really? I mean, this is how naive I was. I just didn't know. And they said, yes, of course you do. You have to give birth naturally. So I said, but how do I do that if the baby's not ready to come out, And they said, well, that's why we're giving you stuff. We're giving you stuff to help it along the way. And it suddenly dawned on me, oh my God, I'm killing my baby. I'm actually killing my baby. And the truth is that by then, I stopped feeling any kicking or anything. So I knew that was almost a lost cause. There was no point in me dwelling on that. Something was so interesting to me when I look back afterwards, and in particular now, I'm bringing this all up now, and I have from time to time, when I felt it's necessary, that actually that feeling was that something sort of arose inside me that made me feel that everything was going to be okay, even though I was I wasn't feeling 100% amazing at the time, as you can imagine. Um, and I took on board everything that anyone said. I thought that my parents were amazing. My father hated hospitals, could ever bear it. He would come, if we were ever in a hospital for like, I was once in for my wisdom teeth, he would walk in and say, I hate hospitals, I've come to visit you, goodbye. I can see you're fine, you know, I can't bear blood, I'm going, and that was it. So I knew that it was very difficult for him, and this was a really big thing that he was doing, coming and sitting with me. My in-laws came, and I don't know why I remember this, but it obviously got to me a great deal. My mother-in-law said something to me, and this is what I heard, and maybe she didn't say anything like this. And I'll talk a bit later about how I realized that, you know, hanging on to something that I had hung on to for so many years is really not helpful. But I heard her say, you know, this is all your fault. You've done this to yourself, basically. And you've got a baby that isn't normal because of something you've done. And what you've done is you haven't bothered to keep in touch with all the family, and that's what happens to bad girls, sort of thing. And I said to my husband, get her out of here. I don't want her in here. And my husband said to me, come, let's go for a walk. And we went out for a walk, and I was told, yes, if you go for a walk, it helps because, you know, that helps. Anyway, you're calmed down, and then you can give birth much easier. And in the event, my father, while I was out, told my mother-in-law off and told her how insensitive she was, and that he thought that she ought to leave. They didn't, but he told her that, and we didn't realise till afterwards. And we came back in, and I just was determined that that was it, I was not going to speak to her ever again. How could I? I couldn't look at her in the face. All my fears, all my worries that this was my fault, she told me, she acknowledged that this was my fault. And I'd had all this dialogue in my head, you know, maybe there's something wrong with me. What's wrong with me that I'm having a baby that's basically disabled, you know? And because what we learnt was that actually the baby may not have survived birth if I'd have gone full term anyway. And even if the baby had, it was a little boy, and even if he had, he may not have lived for many, many weeks, hours, let alone months or years. I'm not saying that because it was a comfort, because it really wasn't. But I'm just saying it just because. I don't know why. I just feel it's necessary at this moment. Now, the interesting thing is that none of the drugs worked. I was told to go home. So I went home Friday evening. I have to point out I need to point this out. I had nothing to do. As I said, I'm an Orthodox Jew, and I wasn't religious at that time. So Friday night, Saturday was no different to me. Now it's very different. And Friday night Saturday is our Sabbath. But we came out Friday night, and I was told to rest until, believe it or not, until Monday, and go back in on Monday morning, and that they would then start the process off again. Now, can you imagine, and maybe you can't, and I certainly couldn't, having to go home and still pregnant when you think that the baby would be born by then, and that it would all be finished, and I would start the healing process or whatever I thought I might have to go through, if anything, and I didn't know what there was there to go through. And there I was going back pregnant, but obviously with a dead baby inside. You know, that was very obvious to me. So I had very little sleep. I tossed and turned. I poured my love into my oldest one, my only child at the time. I didn't know what else to do. I think I probably cried on his shoulder. I think I felt that I had to be strong in the face of my husband, you know, in front of him. I just didn't know what to do. And we went back on Monday morning. I don't know how I made it through that weekend. I really don't. But we went back Monday morning, and I actually gave birth Monday night. And I made my husband promise me that he wouldn't look at the baby because I just couldn't face it. But they do take pictures of the baby, but I didn't want to see them. I didn't want to have them. And they told me they were going to keep it on file because there'd probably be a day I want to see them. And I thought that was a load of rubbish. How would they know how I would feel? And how dare they tell me what I want? You know, I was really very bolshy about it at that stage. And we went home, and I set out to not take notice of how I was muddling through life. And I fell pregnant again, which is what I wanted. I aimed to do that. They told me I had to have an amniocentesis. I held my breath. I had another amniocentesis. They told me everything was fine. And I had a very healthy boy who is, at the end of August, going to get married to an amazing girl. And, you know, we love him very dearly. At the time, the truth is, I wanted a replacement. I was delighted it was a boy because I wanted to replace with like. And it wasn't until he was about 2 that suddenly I started to feel really unwell. I didn't feel good. I felt really lethargic. I felt unhappy. I felt just as if nothing was worth living for. I guess I really felt depressed, overwhelmed, unable to cope at the time with anything, with any little thing, and every little thing was annoying and upsetting, and I refused, of course, not of course, but I did still refuse to speak to my mother-in-law, although she did come round, and everything that she did was like, I don't want to speak to you, you know, I don't want nothing to do with you. It was like I would give her the cold shoulder. And she always said, well, I don't know why you're treating me like this. And I thought, what a cheek, how could she not know? You know, she said it. But anyway, I didn't feel good, and I said to my husband, you know, I'm going to go to the doctor because I think something's wrong with me physically, and I think maybe I need some blood tests. That's what I need. That's what's going to make me better. So he said, okay, and he watched the 2 kids while I went down, and I don't know why, because I usually used to drive down to the doctor's. It's not terribly far, but for some reason I decided to walk, and I walked down to the doctor, and it's very interesting. I can actually almost, you know, see it now. And I went in there and I told her I wasn't feeling good. And I told her, and she said to me, I think there's something else going on. And I said, no, that's absolute rubbish. I don't know what you're talking about. There's nothing in my life that's bad. You know, I've got 2 kids. I'm very happy. What could be so bad? You know, she said, no, I don't know why. I just think there's something underneath. How interesting, how innately healthy. And she took the blood anyway. They took blood and they said, well, wait for the test to come back and see. And I left the surgery and I started to walk back. And I don't know why, but on the way back, suddenly I felt this overwhelming relief, this peace that came over me. And I just suddenly realized, you know, there is something. There is something that I haven't admitted to myself for all this time that I'd spent being busy with my son, with both of my sons, but in particular with the youngest one, bringing him up, helping him to, to crawl, to walk, to sit, whatever it was, you know, spending all my time with him, loving both of them, but putting everything into both of them. That was what I was doing. I was giving myself over and sort of, and I really think that I was, I know the word denial comes up in my head, but I don't know if it's quite that, but I certainly pushed it aside. I pushed everything aside. Now afterwards, when I got home, I told my husband, you know, there is something wrong. I need to see someone. I don't know who, but I need to see someone. There was a Jewish organization, and he said, well, let's get in touch with them. And I went to see someone there. The woman didn't say a word to me, I don't think, except give me a box of tissues. I think I sort of made my way through, steadily through the whole box. Cried my eyes out, snivelling all over the place. I don't know what I said, but I do know I felt better afterwards. How crazy is that? But I did. And she said she would like to see me next time in my home. I think she was worried I was beating up on my children and taking it out on them instead of actually showering them with love, which I was doing. But you know, I certainly could see now how that could go either way. You know, my behaviour could go either way just from one thought about, you know, my pain. So she told me about a group that I could go to, and we went. I mean, my husband told me it didn't help him at all, but he went because of me, which was very kind of him. And I sat there and sort of listened to everyone else's sob stories and realised, well, okay, I'm not normal. I'm normal. You know, I'm going through a process that I didn't go through before. I needed to grieve. I needed to mourn. I did lose a child that I carried for nearly 24 weeks. And so I went to a couple of group sessions, and then I found that I just actually, for me, I didn't need it anymore. And it was then that I said to my husband, please go and bring the picture back. So you see, they were right. They knew, even though I was very bolshy about it at the time. And he brought the picture back. And you know what? The truth is that at first I needed to look at it a lot. Here was a baby you could see was very visibly, very physically disabled. You know, I could see that at a glance. I don't know why, but I was glad I saw the picture. For some reason, it did give me comfort. And I guess that was it. I mean, my life continued. I had 6 years later another child who is now nearly 18. And then I had a child with Down syndrome. And I did nothing. I didn't have blood tests unless it was for me to make sure I was healthy. And I didn't have any scans because I didn't need to know, because I knew I was going to have the baby no matter what. And by then I was in my 40s, so there was a high likelihood that I could do that. I could have a child with a disability, and in particular Downs. So you see, it sort of came back to bite me. I always laugh about it. And it came back with a double whammy, because then we adopted a child with Downs as well. So, you know, but I guess that's my story of the past. But you know, what has happened since understanding 3 principles and knowing that I have mental health inside me that is my birthright is I saw really the process of what I went through in a very real terms. I saw, like I was, you know, saying, that I felt this overwhelming feeling of peace at that moment when I suddenly occurred to me that I realized that actually, you know, there was something wrong with me, and and it led me to exactly what it was. Now, there was no reason why I would have thought that, but I do believe that, you know, there is an intelligence, a greater intelligence. There is the electricity to life that, you know, keeps us ticking and working and knows far better than I do how to work this world. And that if I get out of the way, then, you know, it works on its own perfectly well. And I just got in the way. I just got right in the way for those couple of years, thinking that I could control and work this out. And actually, the minute I got out of the way and relaxed, he told me what was wrong. And I found that was very interesting. Now, I'm not saying I saw it as that then. I do see it like that now. I see it very really as that. And then I also see, you see now, you know, we're going to have my son's wedding and my mother-in-law is going to come over. But even before that, I said to my husband quite a while ago, a couple of years ago, I said to him, you know, your mother is on her own in England now. How about you ask her if she'd like to come and live here with us? And he sort of looked at me and said, are you serious? I said, yeah, I'm really serious. Because, what am I doing? What am I doing? I have one shot of life here now. I lost the baby, okay. But, I think what is important is that there's life after that. It doesn't have to stop there. There's something, and life can be just as rich and fulfilling as during and before, And yes, I do remember those times when it comes up. It doesn't come up often, but something like this, when how we got to talk about this in the first place, and you asked me onto this, I didn't know what I was going to say about this, but it suddenly occurred to me, this might be helpful to people. So yeah, I don't know. That's it, I guess.
Thank you for being so open about sharing that, and I know that's going to help people that hear this, watch this, that have been in a similar situation. And it's like you said, when you went into the group, you found that you weren't the only one. Obviously, the stories were different, but there was that common experience running through the group, and I always think that's a great help to be able to know that we're never unique in our experience of these things, and there are other people that understand and have been there. And something that interested me that I'd like to explore with you, Sue, is when you said, it took a while for you to go and ask for help, and obviously, your inner wisdom was guiding you in that direction. But also, do you think your inner wisdom was guiding you when you weren't seeking help and just protecting you in the best way for you then?
Yeah, that's a really cool question. And yeah, I really do. And it's really cool question because it sort of makes you sort of realize that it's so true. Yeah, the wisdom, with what I had to hand, with the resources that I had to hand in those moments, in those years, was my a call. I don't know if this is this. I hope this makes sense. It was according to the way I was thinking at that time. That's all I had to hand. I didn't have anything else. So I was trying the best that I could with the resources that I had to hand. And that to me, in whatever way, I mean, I like the way you said it was like sort of protecting myself almost, and that's why I believe that, yes, it's true that I was sort of, and it wasn't an excuse. That, I felt that it wasn't an excuse. It wasn't. That's why I said to you, I wasn't in denial. I didn't feel it was denial. I felt it was something else, and I think you pinpointed it. So thank you. It made me realize something as well, that it wasn't anything like that. It was my wisdom, my common sense kicking in, telling me this is what you have to do now in this situation for you at this moment. And maybe 2 years down the line, well, if the wisdom had told me, 2 years down the line, you're going to see that that's not what you need, and you need to go and see something else, I wouldn't have believed it. But at that time, and what was relevant for me in those moments, it was to protect myself and to protect. I felt like I had to protect my children and my husband too. And I guess in a way I was worried about my outpouring, what it could be like, what would happen, and would the family sort of, go into war, and I didn't want that, So yes, at that time the wisdom was working just as well, but I didn't see it. And if someone had told me it, I think I would have bopped them on the nose.
Well, just as well we're separated by
Yeah.
screen then.
No, if they'd have told me then, I mean.
Well, I love the phrase that you use, common sense, because this sometimes can sound a bit not woo woo, but and to bring it back to, yeah, we're talking common sense here. The common sense, the innate common sense that's inside of us, that that knows,
Yeah.
that guides us. That's
Yeah.
always there, and it's sometimes it can come out that it's only on the sort of the better things that we do,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also there when we're in the place you were to begin with. It's still there quietly. It's taken its foot off the gas a little bit, and it's just letting us drift along. But no, I don't want to use it. It's keeping us safe, but it's still bubbling there in the background. And then when we're like with the book, like with the CD, when we're actually ready to hear, really hear, that's when we're ready to go a little bit deeper with the wisdom and take the next step.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true, and it's interesting as well because sometimes it doesn't. For me, for example, in this particular example, and this experience that I went through, the doctor said something to me, and she was like the messenger. That's the way I look at it. She was the person that sort of, for me, sort of. Uh, Something she said resonated with me. Something made sense to me. And I did initially sort of think, well, forget it, you don't know who you're talking to. I'm a strong lady here. Nothing touches me. What do you want? You don't have to worry about me. But, I'm physically not well. Just get on with your job. Don't tell me other things that you don't know about. But actually, obviously, it had resonated to something had resonated because when I came out, it struck me. It really hit me. It hit me really deep inside that something, and even then maybe at that moment I hadn't necessarily associated it with what she'd said, but, afterwards I did really realize that, something had touched me in what she said. And in the same way, many years later when I went to see the rabbi's wife, the Rebbetzin Twersky, and what she said, that, something had obviously touched me then. I mean, I'd gone on just as I had then. I got pulled in the china shop, walked all the way into town and, hadn't seen anything. And yet on the way back, something touched me. And it, what I like what you said is that, I was obviously, what, I keep saying that word and it's not obvious, but, I was open to hear something. I was ready and I was able to hear something that I might not have heard before. And I think sometimes that it's, for me, sometimes it's almost when I'm on my knees, that I hear something, that I realize I must have been open to hear something that I maybe hadn't been prepared or wanting to hear before. Not with everything, but in the two examples I've given you, because there's a very big letting go with that. There's a very big letting go and a trust when you let go that we're really not in control and that there's something else that almost, well, not almost, but isn't tangible, that we can't see, you can't touch, where is it? We don't know. It's everywhere. It's in us. It's around us. But it doesn't. It's. I don't like this word honestly, but this is my thinking about the word. But it's formless. It's nothing, tangible for us. But there is something there that sort of guides us and wakens us up to things when we really need it. Yeah.
And that brings us beautifully back to where you started with, you heard let go
Yeah.
all those years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I did. I did very much so. Yeah. And I do believe at that stage that, again, I was literally on my knees, and I was about almost to give up. There's something not right here. I don't know what it is, but it feels majorly uncomfortable. I'm not happy with this. It's really not good. And that's when I was able to hear something. I mean, come on, I mean, the man said it maybe 100 times to me. And not only that, but he said it in the same tone of voice. And he didn't say, what, Sue? Let go. It's you I'm talking to, only you.
What, you mean there wasn't a personal message on the on the CD saying, this is just for Sue Lachman?
Well, the funny thing is that it did feel like it was a personal message. It did. It was. And I didn't need to do anything. That was the interesting thing as well. I didn't have to do anything. There was no work attached to this. It was very, very simple. I just did as it said. I just let go. And I wasn't a doing, though. It wasn't something that I consciously worked towards. It wasn't hard work. It just something that sort of made sense to me in that moment. Just
It's more
made
a falling
sense.
away. Would you say
Sorry?
more a falling away of,
Yeah,
don't need that anymore?
yeah. Yeah, that really is very true. Yeah. It is. It's more of a falling away. I like that. That's very nice because I did actually feel almost like some of my masks that I'd put on top of who I really am had sort of gone away. And I think that's almost why I kept looking over my shoulder to see, well, she's going to come back in a minute. She's going to tap me on the shoulder and say, get out of my body. Who are you? Get out, make room. You don't belong here. And along the way, the more and more I learn, the more I hear with innate health, with 3 principles, the more I see that, masks and veils sort of come off, and I feel freer, I feel much, easier. And, for me, certainly, although something like that happened well over 20 years ago, 22 years ago, I can still see the common sense thread working through that. The wisdom of it all, the sense of it all working in that. And that we really don't know the bigger picture. That it's, I mean, there's no way that I laugh and I say, well, it came back to bite me that I've got two for the price of one sort of thing. But I still don't know the bigger picture. I still don't. I mean, I can think that that's it. This is the end. But it isn't. And I don't have to live in that spiral, downward spiral. I can be free of that and live with freedom and ease the way I am now, for the most part. I can't tell you I don't shout, because it's not true. I would like to say that, but it's not true. But I recognize what it is very quickly. And as far, I've lost both my parents. Both my parents have died now. And I remember going through that too, and the grief. We have a very nice system. We have a system where we sit for for a week, and people come to us to speak to us, and it is comforting. You have time for peace. You have time to come down to mourn, and I do really believe that people need that space. You need that time. And it's helpful, and for me it was most definitely helpful to speak to someone, without a doubt. I really even though maybe, they didn't say, I don't remember her saying anything the first person. And even though in the groups I didn't actually maybe say terribly much, I was just listening more than anything. But it just was so helpful. And as you said, to know that I'm not the only one. I mean, I'm not the only one having these thoughts, that I'm just not. That other people have the same thoughts. It's just how I experience them, that I have a choice in how I experience them. So that's always fascinating to me. I just love that. So, for me, if I gave any message to anybody with this, it's it's helpful. I see it as very helpful to have some understanding of three principles in innate health, and to speak to someone that has some understanding themselves of it and has been through an experience like this, so that you can feel secure and safe, which I did, which I needed to feel, and I did feel when I went to speak to someone. And that space allowed me to grieve and mourn, and then basically get over it and then live life, because that's what it's all about. It's not helpful to continue, if I had, in the way I was, because could have, and I'm surmising here, I'm guessing, but I could have continued and become quite ill, I'm sure, with my own thoughts, because I've seen that happen to people, and they get so into everything, continuously, buying in and taking the thought thinking seriously, and actually it manifests itself physically in some way. And it was beginning to already in me. I was beginning to think there was something wrong with me. So if anything, my advice would, I don't like to give advice. I would suggest, I'm not telling anyone to do this. I just know, certainly from my experience, let's just talk from that because that's important. From my experience, it was immensely helpful to feel safe and secure with someone that I could relate to, and they could relate to me. Mm-hmm. And from my experience now of understanding innate health, the three principles, for me, that's the way forward. That helps you to see that there is life, and that there is new, fresh thought that can come through at any moment, and that life is good. It's great.
Thank you, Sue. I think that's a lovely point to draw this to a close, and just thank you so much. That was deeply moving, and thank you for sharing so openly and talking about that experience. If people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that, Sue?
So the best way is to go on my website, www.suelachman, and the Lachman is spelled without a T, so it's LACHMAN.com, suelachman.com, one word. And on there you can sign up for my newsletter and the free audio I'm giving, and stay in touch with me. And there's my phone numbers and contact details on there. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. It felt very easy for me to be able to speak to you, and I think that I felt very secure and able to speak about it from the feeling here. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you again, Sue. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
And thank you for everybody that's either watching this live or will listen to the recording. And please get in contact with Sue if you've got any questions, or you can email me. The email address is in the details of this hangout. And there'll be another number 4 in the series coming up next Monday. So until then, Thank you very much, Sue, again, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye bye now, everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye.